This is an NBC News special report. Here is Tom Brokaw.
Good afternoon, everyone. This is a highly significant day in the continuing standoff between the Bush administration and Saddam Hussein of Iraq. The United States ambassador to the United Nations, John Negroponte, has told reporters that based on the evaluation of the 12,000-page declaration that Saddam Hussein filed with the United Nations, the U.S. now believes that he is in material breach. That is cause enough for the president to go to war. But the plan is for the administration now to spend time persuading other members of the UN Security Council that, in fact, Saddam Hussein has not met what they asked of him in the UN resolution passed unanimously. Today, as well, Hans Blix, who heads up the UN Weapons Inspection Program, described this as an opportunity missed based on his preliminary evaluation of the declaration from Saddam Hussein. He cannot be confident that Saddam Hussein has no weapons of mass destruction. So that's the scenario that sets up the news conference now by Secretary of State Colin Powell, who has been working hard on the diplomatic front at the UN, and now he'll share, again, at a very high level, the United States' view of Saddam Hussein's status.
Well, good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. On November 8th, the United Nations Security Council responded to the challenge issued by President Bush in his 12 September speech to the United Nations General Assembly. On that day, the Security Council unanimously passed Resolution 1441, requiring Iraq to disarm itself of its weapons of mass destruction and to disclose all of its nuclear, chemical, biological, and missile programs. Resolution 1441 was the latest in a long string of Security Council resolutions since Iraq's invasion of Kuwait. Previous resolutions, which included requirements to disarm and to end the cruel repression of the Iraqi people, have all been defied or ignored by Iraq. Resolution 1441 recognized that Iraq, quote, has been and remains in material breach of its obligations, unquote, but gave the Iraqi regime, quote again, a final opportunity to comply with its disarmament obligations. Iraq's answer came on December 7th in a 12,200-page document submitted to the Security Council. Resolution 1441 required Iraq to submit a declaration on all its mass weapons programs of destruction, a declaration that was currently accurate, full, and complete, in the words of the resolution. The inspectors told the Security Council this morning that the declaration fails to answer many open questions. They said that in some cases they even have information that directly contradicts Iraq's account. Our experts have also examined the Iraqi document. The declaration's title echoes the language of Resolution 1441. It is called Currently Accurate, Full, and Complete Declaration. But our experts have found it to be anything but currently accurate, full, or complete. The Iraqi declaration may use the language of Resolution 1441, but it totally fails to meet the resolution's requirements. The inspectors said that Iraq has failed to provide new information. We agree. Indeed, thousands of the document's pages are merely a resubmission of material it gave the United Nations years ago, material that the UN has already determined was incomplete. Other sections of the Iraqi declaration consist of long passages copied from reports written by the United Nations and the International Atomic Energy Agency. The only changes the Iraqi regime made were to remove references critical to its own conduct. The declaration totally fails to address what we had learned about Iraq's prohibited weapons programs before the inspectors were effectively forced out in 1998. And let me just touch on a few examples, and we'll be giving out a fact sheet later with additional examples. Before the inspectors were forced to leave Iraq, they concluded that Iraq could have produced 26,000 liters of anthrax. That is 3 times the amount Iraq had declared. Yet, the Iraqi declaration is silent on this stockpile, which alone would be enough to kill several million people. The regime also admitted that it had manufactured 19,180 liters of a biological agent called botulinum toxin. UN inspectors later determined that the Iraqis could have produced 38,360 additional liters. However, once again, the Iraqi declaration is silent on these missing supplies. The Iraqi declaration also says nothing about the unaccounted precursors from which Iraq could have produced up to 500 tons of mustard gas, sarin gas, and VX nerve gas. Nor does the declaration address questions that have arisen since the inspectors left in 1998. For example, we know that in the late 1990s, Iraq built mobile biological weapons production units. Yet the declaration tries to wave this away, mentioning only mobile refrigeration vehicles and food testing laboratories. We also know that Iraq has tried to obtain high-strength aluminum tubes, which can be used to enrich uranium in centrifuges for a nuclear weapons program. The Iraqi regime is required by Resolution 1441 to report those attempts. Iraq, however, has failed to provide adequate information about the procurement and use of these tubes. Most brazenly of all, the Iraqi declaration denies the existence of any prohibited weapons programs at all. The United States, the United Nations, and the world waited for this declaration from Iraq. But Iraq's response is a catalog of recycled information and flagrant omissions. It should be obvious that the pattern of systematic holes and gaps in Iraq's declaration is not the result of accidents or editing oversights or technical mistakes. These are material omissions that, in our view, constitute another material breach. We are disappointed, but we are not deceived. This declaration is consistent with the Iraqi regime's past practices. We have seen this game again and again, an attempt to sow confusion and buy time, hoping the world will lose interest. This time, the game is not working. This time, the international community is concentrating its attention and increasing its resolve as the true nature of the Iraqi regime is revealed again. On the basis of this declaration, on the basis of the evidence before us, our path for the coming weeks is clear. First, we must continue to audit and examine the Iraqi declaration to understand the full extent of Iraq's failure to meet its disclosure obligations. Second, the inspections should give high priority to conducting interviews with scientists and other witnesses outside of Iraq where they can speak freely. Under the terms of Resolution 1441, Iraq is obligated. It is their obligation to make such witnesses available to the inspectors. Third, the inspectors should intensify their efforts inside Iraq. The United States, and I hope other council members, will provide the inspectors with every possible assistance, all the support they need to succeed in their crucial mission. Given the gravity of the situation, we look forward to frequent reports from Dr. Blix and Dr. El-Baradei. Finally, we will continue to consult with our friends, with our allies, and with all members of the Security Council on how to compel compliance by Iraq with the will of the international community. But let there be no misunderstanding. As Ambassador John Negroponte said earlier today, Saddam Hussein has so far responded to this final opportunity with a new lie. The burden remains on Iraq, not on the United Nations, not on the United States. The burden remains on Iraq to cooperate fully and for Iraq to prove to the international community whether it does or does not have weapons of mass destruction. We are convinced they do until they prove to us otherwise. Resolution 1441 calls for serious consequences for Iraq if it does not comply with the terms of the resolution. Iraq's non-compliance and defiance of the international community has brought it closer to the day when it will have to face these consequences. The world is still waiting for Iraq to comply with its obligations. The world will not wait forever. Security Council Resolution 1441 will be carried out in full. Iraq can no longer be allowed to threaten its people and its region with weapons of mass destruction. It is still up to Iraq to determine how its disarmament will happen. Unfortunately, this declaration fails totally to move us in the direction of a peaceful solution. And I'd be prepared to take some questions.
Mr. Secretary,
Yes.
I'm a little confused because this was to have been Iraq's last chance. And you've just laid out 4 additional things, including interviewing scientists, and you're still saying that Iraq has the opportunity to so and so and so. I don't know if you're saying an airtight case hasn't been made, or somehow you have some slim hope it can be turned around by Iraq.
It remains to be seen. The resolution was its last chance, and there were obligations for Iraq in that resolution. 1, to accept the resolution. 2, to provide a declaration. We have begun our analysis of that declaration, and we find so far that it has failed to do what it was supposed to do. But we will continue to work with UNMOVIC and IAEA, and we'll consult with other members of the council to see what conclusions the council members arrive at, and to see whether or not more evidence can be brought forward to make the case to the council that Iraq has totally missed this opportunity. But so far, with respect to complying with the conditions and the terms of 1441, Iraq is well on its way to losing this last chance. Yes.
Mr. Secretary, you've used the expression material breach. Can you tell us why you've chosen to use this? And how would you answer those who've been saying this morning that by using this without taking action, you are in fact devaluing the expression?
Material breach, I think perhaps too much has been made of the term. Material breach is a term that comes from the law that says a party to a commitment has failed in meeting the terms of that commitment. Iraq has done that repeatedly in the past. That's why 1441 begins with that statement of past material breach on many occasions by Iraq, still in material breach, and this is a new material breach. I don't think we are devaluing the term. I think we're using the term to make it clear to the world that once again we have a breach on the part of Iraq with respect to its obligations, and therefore the spots have not changed. Now, I'll let the other members of the council make their own judgment as to whether they wish to characterize it as such right now. The important point, I think, is that what we heard from Dr. Blix and Dr. Albaradai this morning, and what I've heard from other members of the council who have spoken, is that there is no question that Iraq continues its pattern of non-cooperation, its pattern of deception, its pattern of dissembling, its pattern of lying. And if that is going to be the way they continue through the weeks ahead, then we're not going to find a peaceful solution to this problem.
Yes. Secretary of State Colin Powell at the State Department today. This has been a day of careful orchestration on the part of the administration. Word has been leaking out for several days now that, based on the preliminary analysis of the 12,000-page declaration filed by the Iraqis, that there were serious gaps and omission. The word recycled information was used repeatedly. Today, that charge went to a higher level when the UN Ambassador John Negroponte at the United Nations today said there is a material breach. You just heard the Secretary describe the legal antecedents of that phrase. And it has been, of course, that phrase that a lot of people have believed will provide the foundation for the President to go to war should he choose to do so at some point under UN Resolution 1441. Today, the Secretary of State, in greater detail and in vivid language, made it clear that the United States does not believe that Saddam Hussein is complying in any way with the demands made by a unanimous vote of the UN Security Council. He said, "We are disappointed, but we are not deceived." Under terms of 1441, he also said, "We can expect that Iraq will face serious consequences." At the same time, the administration has been making it clear that they hope to continue diplomacy at the UN Security Council so that everyone will be in agreement at the end of January when the formal reporting is required as to what to do next. We'll have more details on all of this tonight on NBC Nightly News, of course. And a reminder, you'll have constant coverage of this story and the road to Iraq throughout the day on MSNBC and CNBC. I'm Tom Brokaw, NBC News, New York.